Hello and welcome to another episode of The Candid Fitness, a podcast where I share my learning through personal stories and also invite guests to talk about their stories or share their expertise on all things fitness, which includes physical health, nutrition, workouts, mental health, self-discipline, and much more. In this episode, I chat with Amy Katebowe, who is founder and coach at the Warrior School, an online community for women who want to get strong. Today we had a very unique conversation about her experience with journaling her physical training and menstrual cycle. Through that process, Amy has developed a system to help women understand their menstrual cycle and use that awareness to bring positive changes to their well-being. Amy has been coaching women for over 13 years, and in this episode she explained all about the whys and how-tos of tracking your cycle. Amy is also a big advocate of bodyweight strength training, so we also discuss why bodyweight training is so important for women. This is a value-packed episode, so make sure you listen carefully and listen until the end. Lastly, if you're looking for online coaching, please head to my website, abhimanyubhargav.com, and check out one-on-one online coaching page. The links are in description. Now, without further delay, come join us and enjoy this candid conversation. That's how I got to know about you.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, this is interesting. I mean, tracking your cycles and your workout and then modifying your workouts based on how you feel is something that a lot of women can learn. And that was, it wasn't intuitive for me to think about that. And I coach a lot of women who struggle with that, during the menstrual cycle, they're not feeling good and they're confused what to do. And I usually say that, do how you feel. Like if you feel energetic, put in a good workout. If you don't feel energetic, then slow down and relax. It's okay if you don't work out. Like a lot of time what happens is you're working out, you have a schedule that I'll work out 4 days a week, and this is what my schedule is. And then it becomes very hard to then take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to do 50% or 60% my capacity during this time. Mentally, like emotionally, it takes a toll. And I'm sure you would have felt that too at some point in your whole journey. So then I thought that it makes sense to have a conversation with you. And before we jump into that, I wanted to understand your story in brief about how did you get to that process of starting to track your cycle, and what led you to do more extensive research on this topic? Because I think that's something that a lot of women would be able to relate to.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to know how I started to track my cycle?
How and why? What led you to do that? Because again, I don't think this is something that is taught in traditional, fitness courses or workshops, right? It's something that you proactively did. So I'm keen to know that part of the story, that what inspired you to do this or experiment with this.
Yeah, you're so right that, as coaches, we're not taught about this. I've been a coach for 13 years and we weren't taught about the menstrual cycle and hormones. And I think that's crazy. And even as women in school, we get taught that we will start to menstruate, but that's kind of it. And then it stops. And so this conversation is very scarce. It's more popular now. And there are a lot of amazing people working in this space around, the menstrual cycle and helping support women understand. But yeah, as coaches, we're not taught this. And as women, often we think that our cycle is a burden, that it works against us. And so I was competing in Olympic lifting in 2015, 2016. And I was always really good at, I had an amazing coach, a really good program. I was very good at recovery. So I had a really good movement and mobility practice. I slept really well. I nourished my body really well. But over a couple of years, I began to feel like something wasn't quite right. I felt irritable. I felt tired. I was getting little niggles and injuries in my training. And eventually I got injured quite badly and I couldn't train. So I went looking for that missing piece. Like what why did some days, I really crushed my training practice, and then other days it just felt so hard and, it crushed me. And what I found, why I was searching and trying to just put together, I guess, the puzzle around why my training just didn't feel quite right, I realized that I didn't understand my cycle, the menstrual cycle. I knew that I had a cycle. My cycle had always come regularly, on time, and mostly without symptoms. So I had never really had cycle problems in my, from when I began my cycle years. So I started to read about the cycle, read about how our hormones change during the cycle, and how that might impact, how we feel, how we could train, how we could recover, how we could use food as fuel. It can impact our sleep. And then when I started to get back into training, I started to lift about 5 or 6 months after I was injured. And then I began by writing the day of my cycle in my training journal. I've been tracking my training for about 8 years. And so I thought, okay, let's just write the day of your cycle in your journal. And then, a few cycles later, I just began to see patterns in how I felt, what day I was on, how the training went, what I noticed. And that's how I started to track, just by writing the day of my cycle in my training journal.
Oh, wow. So were you writing other things also, like how do you feel or your energy levels? What was that you were tracking apart from the days?
Yeah. So the program, like what I'm doing for the day, the intention, or, the purpose of the session, what I actually did, how I felt, my sleep, anything that I noticed, physically in my body, or like emotionally or mentally, that had come up in the session. Yeah, basically anything that I had noticed from the day. And I got into that practice, yeah, about 8 years ago, when I really started to build my training foundation again. And so I thought, why not? Why not just like write the day of your cycle in your journal and see if you notice any patterns? And over time, I did notice some patterns. And then that really helped me just understand my cycle, understand maybe what was happening, why things felt a little harder sometimes. And from that, I could just put in some strategies to support myself. If I still wanted to train hard in that second phase, I could. And I just understood what was happening.
Right. And do you think those, based on your experience coaching different women afterwards, that those patterns are relevant or they are similar for every woman, or every woman has different patterns?
Yeah, great question. So they talk about this rule, like the big red balloon rule. And what the rule is that no two cycles are the same. So my cycle is very different from another woman's cycle. Her cycle is very different from mine. And then my no two cycles could be the same. This cycle this month could be very different to last cycle or my next cycle. And there's loads of things that can impact our cycle. So I think the first thing is that, each cycle could be different, and my cycle is very different to another woman's, but we should have, pretty much we should have a healthy regular cycle that arrives on time. Now, whatever that means to us is a little different. Yeah. Like my cycle is around 30 days. It's always been around 30 days. And there are some patterns that I've picked up just from tracking it. Now, we have the science part, so, and we can talk about this. We could talk about like what some of the science says around the menstrual cycle and training and the physiology. And then we have what we know. And so I didn't learn to train with my cycle through what the research said. Yeah, of course I read it and it was super interesting, but I learned to train with my cycle through tracking my cycle, and really understanding it.
Experimentation. Yeah.
Yeah, and experimenting and knowing that it's just one tool, out of many tools. And this space is starting to really flourish, and you'll probably see it over the next, year or so. A lot of people come into this space and talk about this stuff. But I think, when I talk about training with the cycle, what I really mean is that it is just a tool. It's not it's not the only tool. It's just one piece. And I think it's really important to know our cycle so we can know our body better and, you know, we can trust our body better. And yeah, we can use it, you know, as a tool, but it's not, you know, the only tool, and our cycles change. And so does, you know, our life and our stress and, you know, there's so many other things that are, I guess, you know, I talk about often this umbrella. You know, if you imagine an umbrella, and the umbrella, like the thing that covers you is like the nervous system. So how the state of you. And then we have all these prongs that like hold the umbrella up, that allow it to do its job. Now, you know, if one or more of those prongs aren't working right, or they're not super strong, maybe our nervous system's not that strong, you know. And what is that prong for you? Now, for some females, it can be their cycle prong. You know, if they suffer a lot of PMS, they have a lot of irregular cycles, painful cycles, you know, that stops them from training. Maybe we really need to look at the cycle prong and we need to do some work there. But for me, you know, I have a really strong cycle prong. It's never been a burden. You know, it arrives on time. Okay, so how could I use it then? All right, well, I'm going to understand, you know, the science of my cycle and what's happening, and how sometimes it can feel a little harder to train, but that doesn't mean I don't train. It just means that I'm aware and I put in strategies to support myself a little more when it feels a little harder.
So when you say umbrella and the prong, so you mean umbrella is like the well-being umbrella, and prongs are all the different, you can say, pillars that support that well-being. So things like nutrition, stress, relationship, work, life purpose, cycle, and cycle is one part of that. Is that how you define umbrella and the prong?
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, all of them are important. And we need to realize that, you know, if we have goals with our training, we need to understand that we have all these other prongs. You know, it's not just the training prong that we need to focus on, because all of these others can affect, you know, how we can train or how we're feeling, or, you know, the state of our system. You know, if we're super stressed and aren't sleeping and aren't eating enough food, and those three prongs are broken or they aren't working right, you know, it's going to impact our training. And I guess, you know, my work works in linking them all together.
Right.
So I have a really strong training background. All the women that I work with, you know, we're working on this training piece, you know, building a foundation, working towards goals that they have. And then I'm just helping them link the nutrition to the training, and then the cycle to the training and the nutrition. So think of a triangle. So if we come back to this umbrella, there are so many different areas. Yeah. I just focus on the training, the nutrition, and the cycle, and help women learn about them and how they all connect. But there are so many other prongs that, yeah, impact, you know, how we feel and how we can train.
Yeah, and it depends on a particular individual which prong is being affected, and then they need to make the right efforts to then fix that prong or work on strengthening that prong.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of mums. So, and you know, they've had like I was I did a post yesterday around Jenny. So she had her daughter 12 months ago, and her daughter's not a fan of sleeping. She's a terrible sleeper. And Jenny came from, you know, a CrossFit background where she was training a lot before her pregnancy. She felt really fit, really strong. She had loads of energy. And then 12 months later, you know, she shared with me that she just felt weak. Everything felt really hard. She felt tired all of the time. And a lot had to do with that. She just wasn't sleeping. You know, she has a daughter that's not a fan of sleeping. And so this sleep is so important. And then everything just felt hard in her day because she wasn't sleeping, but she wanted to get back into training. And so it's just looking at, okay, like if you aren't sleeping that well, what can we do? What do we need to do to support you so you can start to train again? Now the training's going to look very different to what it did before, because doing high intensity group fitness classes is not going to support the physiology when you're not sleeping. You know, you have a 12-month-old You're not eating enough food because you're running around after your child all day. And so it's looking at, all right, so we need a training practice that's not stressful, that really supports where we're at. It supports our physiology, how we're feeling. And often that's just coming back to like body weight strength training, it's just, or gymnastic strength training, starting to build that foundation again. Everything's a little slower, more controlled. We're not going into the high intensity, I guess, the red zone. We want to stay down at the green zone. Yeah. And then we looked at her food, is she eating enough? Yeah. Is she eating often enough? Is she balancing her meals? So there are some like easy wins or things that we can do. If one of our prongs is causing so much stress, whether that's our sleep or our work or, our environment or a relationship. Okay, we might not be able to change that straight away, but we can definitely look at some strategies to put in place to support us, to support the nervous system, to give us more energy. And one of them is looking at like what type of training are we doing? Yeah. And is that supporting us right now?
And why do you think body weight strength training or gymnastic is like the foundation, or is something that is beneficial for initial stages, or someone who's had a baby and it has one of the prongs, in this example, sleep, affected?
Yeah, great question. I don't think it's just important for, a female that has given birth. I think it's important for everyone to build a really strong foundation. And what I mean by that, I guess, if you think of a house, yeah, you need to survey the land, you need to flatten the land, you need to lay down like the concrete. That is like the foundation. And if you don't do that and you just start building this house on just a piece of land that hasn't had a foundation, over time, it's going to break down, whether it's from the weather or time, we're going to start to see cracks. And that's how I kind of think about like the body, we need to build this foundation, and it's coming back to, can I control my body?
Yep.
In space? Can I use my body? Can I do body weight strength stuff? Can I develop that tension, control, and stability? And for me, there can be loads of ways to do it, but the way that I teach and from my own experience, body weight strength training, gymnastic strength training teaches us so much about, our own body and controlling our own body. It's slower as well. Like, it's of course it's hard. Yeah. We can like get really complex and build on it, but it's a slower pace. Often there's been so many times, when I've trained in other gyms, like normal gyms, people will be like, you don't really like do much. Like you look very like slothful. Do you know what I mean? Like you sit around, you rest for a long time.
You need
It's
that
like,
rest, because
yeah, you need
you
that
are
rest.
you are putting a lot more pressure on your body compared to lifting a dumbbell, which is like 5 kgs or 7 kgs or 10 kgs or whatever. You are lifting your whole body weight. So
Yeah, and I think it's really important. Like, can we control our body before we add external load to it? Yeah, or before we move it fast. Now, not saying that you can't do them parallel to each other, and a training practice can be like very general, and you can do a lot of things. But for the women that I start working with, they've been doing high intensity training and over exercising for years or decades. They haven't been eating enough food or food that's supporting them. A lot of them are mums. And so there's a lot of pieces, and it's really stressful. So coming back to just walking, learning how to build their foundational strength again, not moving fast. Now, not saying the training is not easy. It's hard. Yeah. Body weight strength training, when we demand quality from the body, and this is the other thing, if we're moving fast, we're doing CrossFit or F45 or whatever it is, there's no quality there. Yeah. And so then if we don't have the quality or the standard, we're not learning to like move the body, safely, efficiently, intelligently. And then that will impact, our abilities to sustain a training practice. Yeah. So I guess the short answer for you is like, it's less stressful at the start.
I'm myself a big fan of body weight strength training. That's something that I switched to after I injured my back. And my reason was because, when you're lifting weight, it puts direct pressure on your spine. And if your form is incorrect, it can lead to injury. There's the chances are more. Whereas when you're doing body weight training, you are in control of your body. So your body adapts in a way that it starts putting lesser pressure on the spine. And then you have to, like, there's no escape when you're doing bodyweight training from building that core strength and stability. Whereas when you're doing weightlifting, you can escape from that in the short term. But then that's what happened with me. I eventually got injured and then I had to work on the basics again. So I 100% agree with whatever you said. And I was actually feeling really happy inside that, oh, you're saying all those things, which I agree with.
Yeah. But it's, it's hard.
It is.
It's hard to do that. It's hard to slow down. I always go on about like slowing down, building the foundation, coming back to, I guess we could call it basics, like there's nothing basic about building a foundation, but we could come back to the basics, and then, tracking the training, tracking the cycle. Like I always go on about this stuff, but it's like not easy. It's not easy to do. This stuff is not sexy. Yeah. This stuff is like, it's the long way home. It takes a long time. We have to take responsibility. Once we choose to do that, we have to keep taking responsibility and keep choosing to like pay attention. And if we got all these other things going on in life, we're navigating all like maybe 3 little humans, and then our relationship and our work, it can be really hard. This stuff is hard and this stuff can really challenge us like on our deepest level of like, I don't know how to like link them together. I don't know how to like progress. And yeah, it's not easy stuff.
It's hard. I mean, it takes time to build that foundation. And then, as you were saying, right, it's not sexy. So, but you have to do it long enough to reach a certain stage when it starts looking sexy. Once you reach that stage, then you are unbeatable. You have like you'll exceed your limits. But to reach that stage, you have to work hard consistently for a long period of time. And most people just don't want to wait for that long and be patient enough to keep doing it.
Yeah, a lot of the time, most of us don't have the energy to do that, actually, the capacity, because of the state of our system and how stressed we are. And, we don't quite have our food right to support ourselves, or we aren't sleeping, or so we actually just don't have the energy to consistently like show up to make it to the end. That's the main problem. A lot of the time, like the women that I work with, they have the motivation, they have it, but they just don't have the energy because they've just got so many energy leakages, or they're not sure how to nourish their system. And then, so they just can't get to the end. So a lot of it is looking at, well, that's when we kind of come back to like, what's the cycle doing? Why isn't it healthy, regular? Why doesn't it arrive on time? What's my food doing? Yeah. Am I eating enough? Am I balancing my meals? Those 2 things are really going to help us to go the long way and to reach, to reach the goals.
So for the women whom you feel that don't have that energy to get to that next level or keep pushing, what do you recommend? Do you recommend them to keep doing it with certain changes and lower intensity exercises, or do you give them some different kind of workout plans which are not as hard and feel much simpler compared to bodyweight exercises?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. There's a few pieces in this. I think the first piece would be like, what's like the biggest stressor like right now? What do you feel like is causing the most stress? Is it the sleep? Is it maybe work? Is it a relationship? Is it the training? Maybe, right now you're not doing the right type of training to support the system, because the system, and that might be stressful. Is it your food? Are you not eating enough food? So the first piece would be, well, what's causing a lot of the stress? We kind of need to know that and then start working on that. Okay. So, but while we're stressed, we can definitely look at tweaking a couple of things out of like the training and the nutrition. Yeah. So the training, we want to make sure that, we're just slowing down a little bit. Yeah. We're walking more. we're coming back to that, to the basics. Yeah. We're building foundational strength, I guess you could say. Let's look at a pull-up. Yeah. A pull-up's a super common goal for a female. She often wants a pull-up. All right. So if she is like maybe doing high intensity training and 5-6 days a week. Maybe there is a bit of pull-up work in there, but she's like on a band swinging around, or doing like jumping pull-ups. All that's too fast. There's like a lot of steps that she's missed to like build into that foundation. Can you hang on the bar for a minute? Yeah. Like that's like the foundation of learning to do a pull-up. We need the grip strength. It's really good for our elbow health and our shoulder health. It helps us open our shoulders up, which we need when we learn to do a pull-up. So it's coming back to like, okay, maybe we need to add some hanging work in. Yeah. And that's pretty slow. That's pretty unsexy, but
And
that's really important. Yeah. It takes time.
And the progression is so hard. Like you'll start from say 3 seconds or 5 seconds, and then slowly in like 5 or 6 months, you'll reach a minute.
Yeah. Like one of the women I worked with, Laura, when we first started working together, she couldn't hold on to the bar for barely 5 seconds and she had to use her feet to support herself. But over time, 6-8 months later, she can hang for a good 40 seconds on the bar. And it's super cool, but it took like 8 months. It's a long time.
And the worst part is the calluses that you get in your hands.
Yeah. They're not as bad as when you do Olympic lifting, but yeah. So the hanging part is really important. And then we need to know that, okay, like, are my shoulders healthy? Yeah. Like, can I do, can I move them properly? Can I move my shoulder blades the way that they're meant to, like up and down and back and forward? Do I have control over them? And then we start looking at some accessory exercises. Can I do some rowing actions, like ring rows? Yeah. There's steps that we need to take. And now that takes a really long time. And which is, it's fun once you get in it, but it's a little bit scary when you're on the outside thinking, wow, man, like to work towards a pull-up, it's going to take me a year or 18 months or 2 years or 3 years, like depending on where I'm at and what else is going on in my life and how much I train. There's just so much to it. But I think understanding that process is really important and having a coach there to help you through it. But you can see how that's a lot slower, that we're working on those. And so that's kind of, I guess, to give you an example of how we like slow it down. And it's all really controlled and strength-based stuff, which is less stressful on our system. And then if you also think of like a main goal for a female often is to change her body composition. Now, this is a really big conversation around like, why does she want to do that? And what does it mean to her? And really digging deep. But if we think about, if we want to change our body composition, well, we need to build lean muscle mass because lean muscle mass at rest burns fat for fuel. And, it's the active tissue in our body that helps us burn more energy when we're at rest. So the more muscles that we have, the more energy we burn at rest, which then therefore supports that goal if we have that goal around our body composition. So often it's swinging away from this high intensity cardio based, training that eats a lot of our muscle mass and is really stressful for the system, to slow it down, come back just to strength training where, everything's controlled, we're resting longer, we're working on building lean muscle mass to support the system.
Yeah. And that again takes a long time. And you will not see a lot of changes in your weight. In fact, there would be instances where your weight will actually go up because you're building muscles, or it'll stay stagnant for a long time.
Yeah. And then it depends on the state of the system as well. We need to get the system strong. And what I mean by that is like your nervous system or your metabolism, how, like if you're chronically stressed all of the time and you have all this cortisol and all these stress hormones in you, and you're still not eating enough or sleeping, and then you're doing this training, there's still like a gap there. We still need to work on supporting the system, eating enough food, resting, sleeping. Yeah. And there's some signs that we can look to make sure that the system is like working properly. And then that's how we can like tailor our training based on like what the body's telling us and how our system is.
So you mentioned phases of menstrual cycle, right? And then tracking those. So what are those phases? If you can explain that in simple language so that I can also understand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great question. So let's just look at the science of a cycle. Yeah. And, when they talk about a cycle, they often talk about like a 28-day cycle, which is like a textbook cycle. If you read a lot of the stuff, it's like 28 days. Yeah. But, that might not be your normal. Yeah. Your normal might be 24 days, 26 days, maybe 30 days, maybe 32 days. Now, there is a range. Yeah. So a pretty like normal, healthy, regular cycle should come between 21, 22, and 35 days. Anything shorter or longer, there might be some stuff going on that we would need to have a look at. But if your cycle's between 21 and 35,
It's a healthy cycle.
it's a healthy cycle. And and it depends wherever you sit, you'll have your normal. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that every cycle will be exactly the same. Yeah. Maybe it's 28 days, one cycle, maybe it's 30 days, another cycle. But if it's around, the same every time, okay, well, that's like the first piece. All right. So if we think of a cycle, basically we can break it into two phases. So the first phase is the follicular phase. The second phase is the luteal phase. In the middle, we have ovulation. All right. So the first phase is from day 0 or day 1. Yeah. So day 1 is like the first day of our heaviest bleed, So we can like have a little bit of spotting, have a little bit of bleeding, but that's not day 1. Day 1 is when we have the heaviest bleed. Yeah. So then the actual period part might go for 4 days, maybe 5 days, maybe 7 days. It shouldn't really go for any longer than 7 days. You shouldn't bleed longer than 7 days. So that's the first half of the follicular phase, from day 1, when I'm bleeding, to, when I stop bleeding. And then once I stop bleeding around day 7, what happens is estrogen, she's the dominant hormone in the first phase. So she's like Beyonce. Yeah. Imagine Beyonce.
Okay.
She's like confident, alluring. She is like sexy. She dominates the stage. She's really good at learning complex dance routines. She's got lots of energy. So around day 8, 9, 10, estrogen starts to rise. And that's when we feel pretty good. Yeah, because she's coming on stage, and she's also going to bring a really cool backup dancer, which is testosterone. Yeah. So also really good for our training. And then we get to ovulation, which is around day 14. This is if we have a 28-day cycle, and we'll just go off that. So then we ovulate. And then estrogen dips a little bit before it rises after ovulation. And with it, progesterone, which is the dominant hormone in the second phase, it rises. So it dominates this second phase. So you can think about the two phases as low hormones, because when we're on our period, our hormones are flatlined. So think of like flat lines, and then they slowly begin to increase, just before ovulation. And then you can think of the second phase as high hormones, because we've got high progesterone and estrogen's also a little high. So we've got these two phases. Now, our hormones can affect like how we feel, how we might recover, how we might train, how we might use food as fuel. So if we understand that, yeah, okay, I have a 30-day cycle, I can look at the first 2 weeks and kind of know that, all right, so around day 10, 11, 12, my estrogen might start to rise. And that might mean that I actually have more energy. I can use carbohydrates as fuel better. My body's more efficient at using them. I have higher testosterone. So that might mean I could train harder. If I have the energy, if my hormones are there to support me, if I can use carbohydrates better to fuel my training. All right, so let's train hard. Let's maybe train more often. Let's lift some weights in this phase because I have my hormones there to support me. Research has shown that I might feel less pain or I could recover faster depending on if I have good recovery strategies in place. And so I feel good. So we can use that, right? We can use that my hormones are lower and then I start to get estrogen and testosterone on stage. They make me feel good. I should have lots of energy around day 10 to, day 16, 17. So I could train harder, I could train longer. And then once I get into the second phase where progesterone is the dominant hormone, it's super important and a lovely hormone. It's good to like calm us and soothe us, but also it brings some stuff with it. Yeah, it increases our core temperature, so our body temperature is a little higher, which can make it a little harder to train sometimes. If we're in a hot, humid environment and our core temperature is already higher, some research has shown that our time to fatigue is a little quicker. If I'm doing hard training in my second phase and it's a hot or a humid environment, and maybe I haven't been on top of my hydration, I might not be able to train as hard, or I might fatigue a little quicker, or things might feel a little heavier just because I'm hotter. Yeah, more in the core. Also, it can affect our sleep just because our core temperature is a little higher. So some females do struggle to sleep as well in the second phase just because of that body temperature. So then if we're not sleeping as well, that can also impact our training. So generally in the second phase, it's being a little bit more mindful about what happens. Yeah, that, our sleep might be a little bit affected. Our core temperature is a little higher. It's a little harder for our body to use carbohydrates as fuel. It prefers to use protein and fat for fuel in that second phase. So it's really about not training in that second phase, but just being aware what's happening. Yeah. And then putting in some strategies to support us if we want to train hard.
So in that second phase, when you say train hard, like, can you give some example of what is hard training? Like maybe from your personal, because when somebody listens to this, a lot of people may think that, okay, I'm not able to train hard, therefore I shouldn't train, or, I should not do any strength training. I should just do a little bit of cardio. Is that what it means? Or does it mean that you're not able to do maybe 100%, but you can still do 75, 80% of your usual?
Yeah, great question. So there is a little bit of a body of research out there around, the different phases and how it affects performance, but there's a lot of variables in it. There's not a lot of research just because we're a little hard to study because of our cycle. So I guess if we look at the two phases, and you'll really only know this if you track your cycle and you're aware of what's happening, but we can look at it from a physiological perspective, or what's happening to our physiology. So in the first phase, our physiology is supporting us to maybe train harder just because our hormones are lower, our core temperature is lower, we can use carbohydrates better. Some research has shown that we can get more strength gains in this first phase. All right, so let's use that. Now, the way that I can break it down, if we kind of want to start to link the training and the cycle together, is the first day or so of the period, some females might experience a lot of PMS. They might have low energy. They might not feel that great. Now, that's not normal, but it's common. So to experience a lot of PMS is not normal. It's the body telling you that there's something going on and the system is stressed. Yeah, it's okay to feel a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of pain in our lower back, or a little bit of pain, in our vagina. Sometimes it can feel like the vagina is falling out a little bit. Yeah, but a little bit, but not too much. We shouldn't have excruciating pain and nausea and headaches and
Cramps and all that.
And cramps. And that's the body saying that, okay, we need to look at something. But we can feel a little bit of discomfort. So, we can honor that and we can just take it slow. Maybe we walk for the first day or so. Maybe we do light yoga practice or a mobility practice. But then we can start to build in. Yeah. After the first few days, we should feel pretty good. So let's let's start to build into whatever we're doing. Yeah. So a lot of the women that I work with will start a new program in this phase, at the start of their cycle. And if we have a focus, we start to build into that training. So, if we're working on a pull up, maybe we start to build in some accessory work. Yeah. Like some ring rows and some, back exercises. And we're still mindful of like how we feel, but we're starting to build some volume in there.
Right.
Okay. And then we get into, our estrogen's higher, we're around day 10, maybe our energy feels really good. All right. Now maybe we can start to like do a complex movement or train a bit harder. Maybe we could lift a little heavier. Maybe we might not have to rest as long. Yeah, we can push ourselves a little more. And then that could look just like doing a little bit more complex movements or lifting a little bit heavier weight if everything feels good. And then we really can maintain that pretty much all the way up to maybe 5 days before our period, where we might start to feel a little bit of a difference. But I call that big section in the middle just like a maintenance, where just do your program. Yeah, like train hard, follow your program, listen to your body. I think the best way I describe it is that I've had some of my best training days, on day 22, day 26, or day 1 of my cycle, when, the research says that we might not feel our strongest, or, it might be harder. And then I've had some of my hardest training days on day 14. Yeah. When I'm meant
When
to
it should
be,
be the
yeah, when I
best.
should like be able to, yeah, be the best and train hard. And, but maybe I haven't slept that well. Maybe the day before I didn't eat that much, or maybe I had a lot on with work, and I did a lot of presentations or a lot of calls, and my body's just tired or my mind's tired. And it doesn't matter if I'm on day 14, I could still feel like shit. And I need to know that. Yeah. So just because the research says something doesn't mean that we follow that. But we can kind of look at the physiology as that foundation and then go off that. So when we get to this second phase, where physiologically we're a little bit impeded and it's a little harder, 5 to 7 days before our period comes again, that's when maybe we just need to like slow down a little again. Maybe we need to rest longer. Now, it doesn't mean change the training. If I'm on a strength training program, I'll still do the strength training program. It just might mean that instead of resting 90 seconds, I might need 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes just to get my heart rate back down, to feel like I'm ready again. It depends what I'm doing. If the movement's really complex, yeah, I probably just need to rest a bit longer. And so we can play with a lot of different things, like the rest period. Maybe we don't lift as heavy, maybe we just change a few variables in the program. And so it doesn't mean don't train. It just means listen. It might feel a little harder. Make sure we're eating enough, drinking enough, sleeping. Those are the main things that we can do. And then we can still show up and do our training program.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it all ties back to your umbrella and prong analogy, that training is, the cycle is one prong of that whole umbrella. So you have to keep a track of that and make sure that you're aware of how you feel from that perspective. And then at the same time, you need to be aware of the other prongs as well. And then based on that, decide how you feel, and then modify your training or tweak your training slightly based on that, and not just entirely change everything.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing as well. We often want to follow just a way or a protocol, or, and be told what to do. And yeah, for sure we can, our coach can give us a program, and we can have these progressions, and we can know, about the cycle. We can know we have the 2 phases, and the second phase might feel a little harder, but really we have to choose to take responsibility for ourselves and know that, okay, like, is the training working for me right now? Am I eating enough? What am I finding by tracking my training and my cycle? Are there some signs that my body's telling me that maybe what I'm doing right now is not supporting me? And I'll only know that if I can like track. So I think, yeah, it's important to know that, yes, we have the cycle. That's the main difference between a male and a female, is that we have a menstrual cycle. That menstrual cycle can impact how we feel, how we can train, how we can recover. But Not always. Yeah. And this is what I tell a lot of the women that I work with. If you have a healthy, regular cycle that arrives on time, you're really good with your nutrition, you recover well, you've got good programming that's supporting you, you should be able to just train and recover. And that's, it doesn't really matter that you have the cycle there, because you have put in all these strategies to support you. And yeah.
And in practice, how do you track it? Like, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, great question. So often I'll just get her to write it in a diary, in a training journal. I'm a big fan of having a notebook and having something like physical
Physical, yeah.
in front of you. Yeah, I've never been a fan of apps. I don't know if it's my age, or I just find something very intrusive about having the phone there to write the training down, or to go into an app. So I love writing it in a notebook, and I would just start by writing the day. Let's start to know when day one is, and then when day one comes again. Let's start to know the length, because you need to know the length of the cycle to then understand when these hormones changes are happening. If I have a 21-day cycle, my hormone changes are going to look very different compared to a 35-day cycle. Yeah, when they are low, when they're high. And so I need to know the length of my cycle first. So start by writing day one, and then just write every day in your journal until the next day. That's the first place I would start. And then I would start paying attention to some other things, like how are you feeling? Maybe on day 14, like over a few cycles, do you feel good? Maybe do you notice that on day 26 that it feels a little harder? And what do you start to notice on the day, and link it to your training? And just by writing a little bit, like some notes in there. And then, so I'm not a fan of apps, really. Probably the best app out there is Fitter Woman. So FITR and then Woman. There's some really great researchers in the UK that were the first app to link like the cycle and training together. So they work a lot with athletes, female athletes, and they do a lot of research around the physiology and how that affects the performance. So that's probably the only app that I would recommend, just to start to get comfortable with like the tracking, and they provide some information in there around the different phases and how you might feel. And then the third piece out of this is fertility awareness method. And, ovulation, so this middle part is the most important part of the cycle. We don't actually need to bleed. Yeah. We need to ovulate.
Right.
So that process needs to happen. And a lot of females, sometimes they don't ovulate. Yeah. And if we're really stressed, the system's really stressed, we're not eating enough, it's super common for females to not ovulate. And then if we don't ovulate, we're not making those key hormones. We're not making progesterone. Yeah. So ovulation is, we need to know if we're ovulating. Now, we can't do that through an app. Yeah. An app can predict, but it's not the way that we see if we're ovulating. We look through body temperature, so taking basal body temperature and cervical mucus. Now, I don't teach that. I would refer to a fertility awareness practitioner, an educator that works in that space. And this is for women that are not on hormonal birth control. Because if you're on hormonal birth control, you don't have a natural cycle, so you don't ovulate. It stops that process because it's stopping you from having a baby. So for all women that are not on hormonal birth control and they want to know, more about their cycle, and they want to know if they're ovulating, I would link into like fertility awareness. And that is a practice that teaches you more about your body, through understanding, certain signs, and to tell if you're ovulating. So there's kind of 3 stages. The first stage, just write the day of the cycle in the journal.
Okay. I think that having that awareness would make a lot of difference, not just for your training, but also life in general, right? It may have some impact on, how you feel when you're going to work, or how you feel when you are just being yourself and doing your own household chores and other stuff. Is that how it works? Like, does that have correlation with your life in general as well, apart from training?
Yeah. I think the best way you can describe it is like females are cyclic. We work on this cycle, and you can notice some things, in different phases of your cycle. There is a little bit of research around when it links to like work and communication. In the first in the first phase of our cycle, we're more, we want to connect. We're better at communication. We really want to get on and like do podcasts and workshops and get out there. And then towards that second phase, the second phase of our cycle, towards the end of our cycle, sometimes we don't want to, maybe we don't feel that great. We don't want to go out and connect it with all these people. Maybe we find it a little harder to get on and do, but not always. Yeah. I think I'm on day 26 right now, and I feel great. Yeah. Like I slept really well. I have eaten, and I'm here talking to you at 7 a.m. and it's day 26, but I feel good.
Did you decide this date based on that?
No, I didn't actually. But sometimes I will look a little bit because, in those last 5 days, it is a little harder sometimes, and it can change every cycle. But I really try and plan a lot of my stuff, the start or the middle of my cycle, just because I find that my energy is better. I really want to like get out there and communicate and share and teach and connect, whereas those last few days sometimes I don't feel like it. Now, it's not saying that I don't do it. I just put in, again, strategies to make sure that I'm supported to do it. But yeah, you're right in saying that it's one piece. It can help us understand what's going on, not only in our training but in our relationships, in our work, in our creativity, in our communication. So it's all connected.
Yeah, so it's not just workout. I think tracking it in
Yeah.
general, it's important.
Yeah, because it builds trust with our body. And I think that's the key thing. It's like, why would I do this? Yeah. Like I don't, so often I'll get some women saying, well, like it doesn't impact me. Yeah. And I don't really feel a difference when it comes to the training. But I'm like, but it's like a tool that you can use and understand to build trust with the body. And I think that's really cool in itself. Like all of this stuff really is teaching us to connect to ourselves, to understand our own body. Yeah. And then be able to use that to tailor maybe our training or our food to support the cycle, or know that the cycle plays a role in the food and the training. And it's really just about connecting, building trust to know that, yeah, my cycle is healthy, it's regular, it arrives on time, I don't have PMS. Like that's really cool. I trust my body. I trust that what I'm doing in my training and my nutrition is working for me because my cycle is telling me the story. Yeah. If my cycle was irregular, if it was painful, now I would ask myself, okay, what am I doing in that umbrella, or is my nutrition and is my training supporting my cycle? Well, no, because it's telling us the story. Other than something medical could be going on for sure. And we always need to seek support of a doctor and get that checked out. But often I'll start with, okay, like, are we eating enough and what's the training doing? And start looking at that. So the trust piece is the most important piece.
Yeah, all that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, was it? did I break it down okay for you? Yeah.
Yes, very well. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to use this whole concept in my own coaching practice as well. Obviously not as good as what you do, but in my own way. So, and that gives me a lot of perspective. And I think those who are listening will also get some sense of what they should be doing. So how much data do you think is enough? Like how many cycles does one need to track to understand that, okay, I've tracked enough. Now I have enough awareness and understanding of my cycle. And therefore I can maybe stop tracking.
Yeah. That's such a big question.
It's like, how you have intuitive eating. So people track their calories for a long period of time, and then they reach a state where they're like, okay, I understand my body now, and now I can stop tracking, or I can reduce, the accuracy with which I track. and slow down a
Yes.
little bit. So is there something?
Great example. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. So with the cycle, it will probably take you 3 or 4 cycles of just writing the day and maybe noticing to see if you could notice. I probably say around 6 months for you to start to get some data just by writing in your training journal and just seeing what's happening. But it's really hard because like no 2 cycles might be the same. It just depends what's going on with your red umbrella and everything. But I would say around 4 to 6 months for you to start to know like the length of your cycle and maybe what's some key things that are happening. If you go to fertility awareness method, I did it for like a year where I like, the temperature, the cervical mucus, the understanding when you ovulate. I don't do that anymore. I just know, I look for some key signs and I know what's happening with my body. But that, I practiced that for a year or more. But you can do this stuff all of the time. It's an ongoing thing. Like I still write the day of my cycle in my training journal. I still write how I feel, so I can still see patterns. Especially as like maybe life changes or my training changes, I want to know how that, how it still all links. So yeah, there's not really an end, there's no end date on it. It's always changing. We always learn new things. I've been doing it for 5 years now and I still learn new things about my cycle.
You're doing it because you certainly see the benefits.
Yeah. For me, I like to know, it builds trust with my body. I want to know that what I'm doing is everything's connected and it's supporting me. Now, I don't pay as much attention to it as what I did when I was learning because yeah, like for me, it's just there, but my training and my nutrition strategies are just so strong that, my cycle just arrives regularly on time and without symptoms. So it doesn't really impact me a lot. Now, if I'm just learning and I have a really irregular cycle that, and then I'm just learning how to train and then I'm trying to fit the nutrition piece in there as well, a lot of stuff, really overwhelming. So just start by noticing.
And you definitely need a coach and support from medical practitioners in those cases.
So yeah, there's, for training, I think it's really important to have a good coach to help you, have a really good process and a method to hold you accountable, to give you feedback. And then if you're having a lot of trouble with your cycle, it's helpful to reach out to a practitioner that works, in cycle health that can support you, and then the food piece as well. It's sometimes really helpful to get some support on the nutrition.
All right. We've covered quite a lot in this
Yeah.
60 minutes packed session.
Yeah.
So where can people reach out to you?
Yeah. So I show up mostly on my Instagram. Where I post a lot of stuff about all of these 3 things that we've spoken about, the training, the nutrition, and the cycle. And so that is Amy Katebowe, Bowe. That's just it's my full name is my Instagram name. And on there, yeah, I just post around, our cycle, our training, our nutrition, how we can link them together. Once a month, I run like a free online session that has like a different theme. So this month is on how to train and eat with your cycle.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So anyone can come, even coaches. I do a lot of work with coaches and how we can start this conversation with our female clients and students. And so I invite coaches to come as well as females who train and want to start to learn how to link them together. So I'm running that on the 20th of March. You can just sign up with the link in my bio and then come along to that. It's free, it's live, it's online, and we'll talk through how to link them to how to start linking them together. Yeah, those are the main things I think that people can link into and connect in with me.
Perfect. And you also have something known as the Warrior School, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah, and I have my podcast. I guess there's
podcast.
I guess there's many more. I do a podcast, which is called Warrior School. And again, we're just talking about like the training, the nutrition, and the cycle. And often I'll get a guest on that works in those areas, and we'll talk about, how we can link them all together and things that we can do to really support our training and help us get results in our training. So I have the podcast, which is named after Warrior School, which is the online school that I run for women, teaching them how to link their nutrition and their cycle to their training so they can get the results that they want in their training.
Okay, perfect. I'll put some of those links in the description so that people can just reach out to you through that.
Beautiful. Thank you. So thank you for having me on and for wanting to have this conversation. I just want to celebrate you as a male coach because, a lot of male coaches don't have this conversation and aren't interested. And I think it's really cool.
Thank you so much. And I think I've learned a lot from this entire conversation, and I'm sure I follow you on Instagram and I'll continue to learn more. So thank you so much for doing this at an awkward time
Yeah.
in Vancouver.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on late at night as well. It was lovely to speak to you.
Guys, this was amazing. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It would mean a lot to us. Hope you find these conversations useful. If you have any feedback or any suggestions, feel free to connect with me on Instagram. So until next time, my friends, have a wonderful day and be awesome.